I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. My name is Jake, and I was happily married to my wife, Sarah, for 8 years. At least I thought I was. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I believed we were solid. Sarah was the love of my life, and I'd always supported her dreams and ambitions. She was a fiery woman, passionate about her career and her interests, but lately something felt off. It started with the little things, a missed call here, a text message there. At first, I dismissed it as work stress. Sarah had been working late more often, claiming it was just the demands of her job. But as weeks turned into months, I noticed her mood shifts. The affectionate kisses and sweet nothings faded, replaced by distracted conversations and half-hearted smiles. The intimacy dwindled, and I felt like I was trying to spark a fire with wet matches. One night, I came home early from work, excited to surprise her with dinner. I noticed her car was in the driveway, but the house was eerily quiet. I called out for her, but there was no response. I walked into the living room and froze. Her phone lay face down on the coffee table, buzzing with notifications. Out of sheer curiosity, I picked it up and in a moment of weakness unlocked it. The screen illuminated with messages, dozens of them. The heart sank in my chest. They were from a guy named Mark, a name I'd never heard before. I quickly skimmed through, my heart racing. The messages weren't innocent. They were laced with flirtation, explicit comments, and plans to meet up. My hands trembled as reality crashed over me like a wave. My wife was cheating on me. I felt my stomach twist into knots. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the couch, struggling to process what I had just discovered. The betrayal was sharp, cutting through my mind like a knife. How long had this been going on? Why didn't I see the signs sooner? The feeling of rage began to bubble inside me, mixing with heartbreak and confusion. That night, I waited for Sarah to come home, rehearsing every possible confrontation in my head. When she finally walked through the door, her face lit up at the sight of me, but then immediately fell as she noticed. Expression. The joy that had once defined our home was gone. I dropped the phone on the table, watching her face drain of color as she saw the endless string of messages. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice shaky but firm. "Jake, I can explain," she stammered, her voice rising in pitch. "Explain what this?" I gestured towards the phone, feeling anger surge through me. "You're having an affair with this guy, Mark. How long has this been going on?" It's not what it looks like. You don't understand." She pleaded, but I was far from calmed. She began to weave a web of excuses, claiming it was a horrible mistake, that she was confused about her feelings, that I drove her to it. Each lie stung worse than the last, igniting my fury. How could she blame me for her actions? I wanted to scream, to make her feel the betrayal she had inflicted on me. The confrontation spiraled rapidly, and I could see the facade she wore crumbling. The woman I thought I knew was revealing her true self, and I was left reeling. In those harrowing moments, I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces. The love I once held for her turned into a hot, seething anger. I was a man betrayed, feeling the weight of her deceit crushing me. As she continued to plead her case, I realized this wasn't just about Sarah's infidelity. It was also about my own self-worth and the life I envisioned for myself. I didn't know then how deep the rabbit hole would go, but I was ready to do whatever it took to reclaim my life. The weeks that followed the confrontation were a blur of emotions. I felt like I was floating through my own life, disconnected from reality. Sarah and I lived under the same roof after that explosive night, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. Each time I saw her, I was reminded of her betrayal, her lies echoing in my mind like a haunting melody I couldn't shake off. After the initial shock wore off, anger became my constant companion. I started obsessing over every detail of their affair. How could she go from being my partner to someone who would betray me so easily? It was as if I was watching a terrible movie unfold, each scene worse than the last. I began to look for signs of her infidelity, scouring our shared calendar and trying to piece together the timeline of her lies. One evening, as I sat in our bedroom nursing a whiskey, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold, a Tinder notification. I had thought the affair was limited to Mark, but there it was, a secret profile with her picture, swiping away on a dating app looking for more connections. I felt sick to my stomach. It was one thing to cheat, but to actively seek others while still living with me was a new level of betrayal. I barely slept that night, running the events of our marriage through my mind. Memories that were once cherished now felt tainted. I remembered the way she would smile at me, how she used to nestle against me on the couch, and how she'd laugh like nothing could go wrong. Now, those moments were overshadowed by the harsh truth of her duplicity. A few days later, I decided it was time to take action. I called a divorce attorney, a man named Robert who had a reputation for being tough but fair. Meeting him was a turning point. As we sat across from each other in his office, he listened to my story, nodding with understanding. There was something about the way he spoke, with authority and empathy, that made me feel like I wasn't alone. He laid out my options, asking what I wanted to achieve. "I want to make her feel the consequences of her actions," I said, my voice steady but laced with anger. "I want her to understand how deeply she's hurt me." Robert told me it was entirely reasonable to feel that way, but he also urged caution. "Revenge can be tempting, Jake, but remember that the best path forward is often the one that minimizes the damage to yourself," he advised. His words resonated with me, but I felt an insatiable need for retribution. I couldn't just let Sarah walk away without feeling the weight of her decisions. She needed to understand what she had lost. I decided to gather evidence, solid proof of her infidelity that I could use in court. Over the next few weeks, I became a shadow in my own home, watching her every move. I took notes, tracking her late nights and suspicious texts. I even enlisted the help of a private investigator. His name was Frank, a gruff man with a soft spot for betrayal stories. He took my case and promised to keep me informed. Slowly, I started to piece together a narrative that was more than just hearsay. The affair was deeper than I initially thought. Sarah had been seeing Mark for months, and there were other men involved, some casual flings, some serious. Each revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and despair. I was gathering everything I needed but still struggling with the emotional fallout. I felt like I was transforming into someone I didn't recognize, a man consumed by bitterness and anger. Then came the night that would change everything. I returned home late after meeting with Frank, my head swirling with thoughts of revenge. Sarah was in our living room, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone. The soft glow of the screen reflected on her face, illuminating her features, but all I saw was the deception behind those eyes. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, her tone casual as if nothing had changed. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to see how she'd react if I played it cool. "Fine," I finally said as I walked past her towards the kitchen. "Just fine," she pressed, her voice laced with irritation. "You don't have to be so distant, you know." My anger bubbled up again. Why would I want to be close to someone who's been lying to me? She looked at me, her expression shifting from irritation to defensiveness. "You don't understand what I'm going through, Jake. You never have. Don't try to manipulate this," I shot back. "You're the one who cheated, you've made your choice." Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of regret. But before she could respond, I walked out, my heart racing. Each confrontation with her was a reminder of the pain, and I was done trying to make sense of her excuses. I didn't want to hear any more lies. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the weight of my emotions pressing down on me. I knew I had to act soon. I was done being the victim. I was ready to fight back, not just for my dignity but for my future. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to gather evidence, but I also felt the emotional toll it was taking on me. The anger that had fueled me was slowly shifting into something more nuanced: sadness, disappointment, and an overwhelming sense of loss. I was losing the man I once was. Instead of focusing on my own healing, I was trapped in the cycle of revenge, and I had to decide how far I was willing to go. The private investigator, Frank, kept me updated on Sarah's activities. He had followed her a few times and reported back with details that confirmed my worst fears. She had been meeting Mark regularly, often at a cafe downtown. There were even times when she stayed out late, claiming work commitments, but Frank's surveillance showed otherwise. She was living a double life, and each time I heard about her escapades, my heart twisted with anger and pain. One evening, after another long day at the office, I sat down with Robert to discuss my findings. He reviewed my notes, nodding thoughtfully as I recounted the times I had caught her in lies. "Jake, you've done a remarkable job compiling this evidence," he said, looking directly into my eyes. "But you need to ask yourself, what do you want from this? Do you want to ruin her life or find closure for yourself?" His question hit hard. Until that moment, I hadn't considered the impact of my actions beyond revenge. Did I want to destroy Sarah completely, or did I just want to reclaim my life? I had to confront the reality that my pursuit of retribution could lead me down a dark path. As I drove home that night, I thought long and hard about the consequences of my choices. I loved Sarah once, despite everything she had done. I couldn't deny the memories of our laughter and love, but the betrayal had tainted it all. I found myself grappling with the idea of forgiveness, but the wound was still too fresh, too raw. When I arrived home, Sarah was already in bed. I could hear her soft breathing from the doorway, and for a moment I hesitated. I had fantasized about confronting her again, about laying everything bare, but tonight felt different. I realized I needed to take a step back. Instead of rehashing the same arguments, I decided to take a different approach. I would let the evidence speak for itself in court. I'd let the judges and lawyers deal with the fallout. I would focus on my own healing and reclaiming my life. With that resolution, I felt the weight of the world lift slightly off my shoulders. The next morning, I made arrangements to finalize my divorce proceedings with Robert. We set a date for the initial filing, and I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation with Sarah, though this time I would not be seeking revenge. I would be seeking closure. When I returned home later that evening, I found Sarah in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked up as I entered, a smile stretching across her face that didn't reach her eyes. My heart ached at the sight. How could someone who once meant so much to me turn into someone I barely recognized? "Hey, you're home early," she chirped, trying to maintain her upbeat demeanor, but I could see the tension in her posture. "What's up?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "I need to talk to you, Sarah. It's important." Her smile faltered and she turned down the heat on the stove, her attention fully on me. "What's going on?" "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. Her face paled. "What, you're serious?" "Yes. I've gathered enough evidence about your affair and I can't be in this relationship any longer. I deserve better." I watched as a whirlwind of emotions crossed her face, shock, anger, and finally panic. "Jake, please. You don't mean that. We can work this out. I'll go to therapy, I swear. Just give me another chance." "Therapy?" I laughed bitterly. "You wanted me to go to therapy while you were off having sex with other men. How does that work, Sarah?" "Don't twist my words," she shouted, her voice rising in frustration. "You don't understand what I've been going through. I felt so alone. It wasn't just about cheating, it was about me feeling abandoned." "Abandoned?" I snapped. "You're the one who abandoned this marriage. You chose to cheat instead of talking to me about your feelings." The argument spiraled from there, with Sarah throwing out desperate pleas and accusations, trying to manipulate the conversation to her advantage. But I had steeled myself against her emotional games. I refused to back down. I told her that I was done making excuses for her behavior and that my decision was final. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. I was finally taking control of my life. No longer would I be the victim of her lies and deceit. The pain of the betrayal was still there, but it was accompanied by a growing sense of empowerment. After a few more heated exchanges, she stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I realized that saying those words, "I'm filing for divorce," wasn't just about ending our marriage, it was about reclaiming my identity. I no longer wanted to be tied to someone who had so little regard for my feelings. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. I knew this was only the beginning of a long, arduous journey, but I was ready to face it. I had taken a crucial step towards healing, and I was determined to find my way back to the man I once was before Sarah's betrayal. It was time for me to reclaim my future. The aftermath of my decision to file for divorce was a whirlwind of emotions and actions. I felt a sense of liberation as well as uncertainty all at once. Telling Sarah was just the first step. Now I had to navigate the legal labyrinth of separation and the change in our daily lives. The next few days were tense. Sarah was distant, alternating between sullen silence and desperate attempts to rekindle some semblance of connection. She would try to initiate conversations, offering half-hearted apologies, but I remained resolute. I wasn't interested in her explanations anymore. I had made my choice, and I was committed to seeing it through. As I dove into the divorce process, I met with Robert regularly. He was a steady presence, guiding me through the legal aspects and helping to prepare me for what was to come. During our meetings, I shared my concerns about how Sarah might react. Would she fight back? Would she lash out in anger? Most likely, she'll try to negotiate or manipulate the situation to her advantage, Robert explained calmly. But remember, this is about you taking control of your life. Stay focused on your goals. On a particularly tough afternoon, I found myself staring blankly at my computer screen, overwhelmed by the flood of paperwork and legal jargon. It felt like I was drowning in the details, my mind racing with thoughts of what I was leaving behind. It wasn't just a marriage, it was the life we had built together. I took a break and decided to go for a walk. As I strolled through the park near our home, I took in the sights and sounds around me, the laughter of children playing, couples walking hand in hand, the rustling leaves in the gentle breeze. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I wanted that kind of peace again. During my walk, I ran into an old friend, Mark, who had been in a similar situation a few years back. We chatted for a while, and he listened as I poured out my feelings of confusion and betrayal. He shared his own experiences of heartbreak and healing, offering insights that resonated with me deeply. Just remember, Jake, he said, this is a chance for you to rediscover yourself. You're not defined by this experience. You have the power to create a new life for yourself, one that aligns with who you truly are. His words struck a chord. I realized that I didn't want to be just the guy who was cheated on. I wanted to emerge from this stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever came next. As the days passed, I began to focus on my own well-being. I started exercising more, going to the gym, and even picking up old hobbies that I had neglected. I began to rediscover joy in small things, reading, cooking, and even going out with friends. I realized that I had a life outside of my marriage, and that was liberating. However, Sarah still loomed large in my life. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I heard the front door open. My heart raced as I saw her walk in. She looked exhausted, her eyes puffy from lack of sleep. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to slam the door on whatever she had to say, but another part of me recognized that we needed to have this conversation for closure's sake. "Fine," I replied, crossing my arms defensively. We sat down at the dining table, the remnants of our life together surrounding us. The silence stretched between us, thick with unsaid words. Finally, Sarah broke it. "I know I messed up," she started, her voice trembling. "But I want you to know that I never intended to hurt you. It just happened. I feel lost without you." I took a deep breath, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "You know what hurts the most, Sarah? It's not just the cheating, it's the lies you told me. You made me feel like I was the problem." "I didn't mean for it to escalate like this," she said, her voice breaking. "I just felt neglected. I thought you were too busy for me." "Neglected?" I shot back, anger flaring. "You could have talked to me. You could have come to me with your issues instead of jumping into bed with someone else." Tears streamed down her face, and I felt a pang of sympathy, but I quickly shut it down. I couldn't allow myself to be swayed by her tears anymore. We were at a crossroads, and I had to remain steadfast. "I can't keep going in circles, Sarah. You need to understand that this is over. It's time for both of us to move on." "But Jake," she started, but I cut her off. "No, I need to prioritize my own healing now. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. This divorce is happening, and you must accept that." She nodded, the fight leaving her as she wiped her tears away. I felt a mix of sorrow and relief. I was finally standing my ground. "I wish things had turned out differently," she said quietly. "Me too," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. "But wishing won't change reality." That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a sense of closure starting to take root. The weight of her presence, of her betrayal, was still heavy on my heart, but I knew I was on a path toward healing. I had made my decision, faced her, and stood firm. I was reclaiming my life, and it felt like I was finally starting to wake from a nightmare. The next day, I met with Robert to finalize the divorce paperwork, ready to take the next steps toward a new beginning. I was learning to take control of my emotions, and I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it held. I was determined to rise above this, not just as a victim, but as a man who had learned from his experiences. I was starting to believe that my life could be beautiful again. As the divorce proceedings gathered momentum, I found myself navigating a landscape filled with uncertainty and emotion. I had filed the papers, but the reality of my decision weighed heavily on my heart. The initial thrill of liberation started to fade, replaced by the deep-rooted sadness of what had been lost. Sarah and I continued to share the house, but the dynamic shifted. We were no longer a couple but two strangers forced to coexist under the same roof. The silence was deafening, punctuated by the occasional awkward exchange of words. I focused on packing up my belongings, sorting through memories that felt tainted by betrayal. One evening, as I was sorting through old photos, I stumbled across pictures of our wedding day. I paused, staring at our smiling faces, radiating joy and hope. It felt surreal to see how blissfully unaware we were of the storm brewing beneath the surface. I felt tears welling up. The memories felt like a cruel reminder of what we had lost. I put the photos aside, forcing myself to move on. I reminded myself that I was in a process of healing and growth. I took comfort in the fact that I was no longer a passive participant in my life. I was actively choosing to forge my own path. One day, while I was at the gym, I ran into Mark, the man Sarah had cheated with. He was engaging in friendly small talk, trying to gauge my mood. I felt a surge of anger at the sight of him. How dare he act casual after what he had done? "Hey Jake, how's it going?" he said, flashing a disarming smile. I felt my fists ball up as I forced a smile in response. "Just working out, trying to stay healthy." "Yeah, I get that. Sarah mentioned you two are going through a tough time. I'm really sorry to hear that." His words felt like a slap to the face. "You don't get to act sorry for me, Mark. You betrayed a trust you didn't earn. You have no idea what it feels like to be on the other side of this." Mark's expression faltered, and for a moment I could see the guilt flash across his face. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that. I never wanted to hurt you." I stepped closer, feeling the heat of my anger rising. "You did hurt me. You took my wife and my life and threw it away like it didn't matter. Just know that I'm done with all of this. I'm focusing on moving forward, and I won't let you or anyone else hold me back." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, my heart racing. It felt good to assert myself, to stand up for what was right. I was reclaiming my power, and it was liberating. That evening, I met with Robert to discuss the next steps in the divorce. He had received Sarah's response to the filing, and I braced myself for the worst. "She's contesting the divorce," he told me, looking concerned. "She wants to fight for certain assets, and she's also hinting at wanting alimony." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Is she serious, after everything she's done? "She's likely feeling threatened and desperate," Robert explained. "But we have solid evidence on our side. Just stay focused and don't let her pull you into a spiral of emotional reaction." I nodded, taking a deep breath. I had to stay strong. The thought of fighting over assets felt petty, but I understood that it was about more than just money. It was about standing my ground. As the days turned into weeks, the divorce proceedings dragged on. I felt myself becoming increasingly frustrated with the process. Sarah was trying to manipulate the narrative, painting herself as the victim, and I found it infuriating. Every time I encountered her, she would attempt to sway me with honeyed words and tears, but I remained steadfast. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I returned home to find Sarah waiting for me in the living room. She looked different, vulnerable, almost desperate. "Jake, can we talk, please?" she pleaded. I sighed, knowing this conversation could lead to yet another round of emotional turmoil. "What is it, Sarah?" I want to apologize. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I realize how much I've hurt you. I never wanted to lose you." "Then why did you cheat?" I shot back, anger bubbling to the surface once more. Why did you betray our vows? You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. I know I messed up. I'm not asking for us to go back to the way things were. I just want you to understand that I was in a dark place and I made a terrible mistake, she said, her voice breaking. I could see the pain in her eyes, but I couldn't let myself be swayed. Your mistakes don't erase the damage you've done. I need to move on, Sarah. I can't keep living in this limbo. Her expression shifted, and I could see the resentment bubbling beneath the surface. You think you can just cut me out of your life like this? You're throwing everything away. No, I'm taking control of my life, I countered. You made your choices, and now we both have to deal with the consequences. This isn't just about you anymore. She fell silent, and I could see the weight of reality settling in. I felt a flicker of guilt for being so harsh, but it was overshadowed by the realization that I was finally putting my needs first. As she walked away, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was reclaiming my narrative, choosing to focus on my future rather than wallow in the past. Days turned into weeks and the court date approached. I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. This was the moment when everything would change. I spent time preparing, reviewing notes, and trying to mentally prepare myself for facing Sarah in court. The night before the hearing, I found myself unable to sleep. I paced the living room, reflecting on how far I had come and how much I had grown. I was no longer just a man betrayed. I was a man determined to rise from the ashes. I had learned to advocate for myself, to seek closure, and to embrace my independence. As I finally settled into bed, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I was ready for tomorrow, ready to face whatever came next. I knew I would emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient than before. I had survived the storm, and I was ready to embrace the light that awaited me on the other side. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I dressed carefully, choosing a suit that made me feel confident and powerful. As I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back at me. I had transformed from the broken husband into someone who was determined to claim his future. Arriving at the courthouse, I was surprised by how calm I felt. I had rehearsed my statements and gone over every piece of evidence with Robert. I was ready. I took a deep breath as I stepped inside, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Sarah was already there, sitting with her attorney, her eyes betraying a mix of anxiety and defiance. She glanced up as I entered, and I could see her mask of confidence slipping just a little. I straightened my shoulders and walked past her, refusing to engage. This was not about her anymore. It was about me taking back my life. The proceedings began, and as we sat before the judge, I felt my heart race. Robert stood beside me, outlining our case with clarity and conviction. He presented the evidence of Sarah's affair, the timeline of events, and how her actions had impacted my life. Each piece of information felt like a reaffirmation of my choice to leave her behind. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, heart pounding, and faced the judge. I recounted my experience, my pain, and how I had tried to salvage our marriage. I spoke about the betrayal, the lies, and how I had come to the difficult but necessary decision to file for divorce. I was honest but measured, determined to convey my truth without letting anger cloud my words. As I spoke, I could feel a sense of empowerment swelling within me. I was no longer a victim. I was a man reclaiming his story. I felt the eyes of the courtroom on me, and for the first time I realized I could control my narrative moving forward. When Sarah took the stand, I could see the cracks in her facade. Her attorney attempted to paint her as a victim of circumstance, but the evidence was overwhelming. As she spoke, I could see her struggling to maintain her composure, her excuses sounding increasingly hollow. I felt a mix of pity and anger wash over me. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. Once the arguments were made, the judge took time to deliberate. As I waited, I felt the tension in the room, my heart racing in anticipation of what was to come. Robert reassured me that we had a strong case and that the evidence spoke for itself. Finally, the judge returned to the bench, ready to deliver the verdict. My heart pounded in my chest. After reviewing the evidence presented and considering the testimonies, I declare the marriage between Jake and Sarah dissolved. Jake will retain the marital home, and Sarah will receive a fair settlement. The words hit me like a wave, washing over me with a mix of relief and finality. I was free. As I glanced at Sarah, I could see the devastation etched on her face. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of empathy for her, but it was overshadowed by my own triumph. After the court proceedings, I stepped outside, the sunlight hitting my face like a warm embrace. I took a deep breath, soaking in the moment. I was no longer bound by the shackles of betrayal. I was free to build a life that was truly my own. Over the following weeks, I focused on healing. I took time to reconnect with friends and family, rediscover hobbies, and even began dating again, cautiously but excitedly. I realized that I was not defined by my past. Instead, I was becoming someone new, someone who valued himself and demanded respect. While the scars of my marriage would always remain, I was learning to wear them with pride. They were reminders of my journey and how far I had come. I was no longer the man who had been blindsided by betrayal. I was a man who had risen from the ashes, ready to embrace life with open arms. In reflecting on everything that had happened, I knew that this experience had taught me valuable lessons about trust, love, and self-respect. I had learned the importance of communication in relationships and the need to prioritize my own well-being. To anyone reading this who might find themselves in a similar situation, I offer this advice. Don't be afraid to take control of your own narrative. Life can throw unimaginable challenges your way, but you have the power to rise above them. Surround yourself with supportive people, seek help if needed, and remember that you deserve a life filled with love, respect, and happiness. As I moved forward, I kept reminding myself, the best is yet to come. I was ready to embrace whatever the future had in store for me.